Acting. Not even once. That was how I summed up Crow's Blood in a review I did on the Kowabana website about 4 years ago now. I had planned to do more reviews there, but in the end never got around to it. A lot of people have been asking me to do some TV show reviews on here recently though, so what better place to start than with one of my favourite guilty pleasure shows, Crow's Blood. Where do I even begin with this one? Perhaps a little background information is in order first. Crow's Blood was a joint production between Akimoto Yasushi and his idol group AKB48, and an American production company. The idea for the story came from Akimoto himself, and then an American writer further worked on the scripts for a true Western and Eastern collaboration. Akimoto is, let's just say, an interesting man, but in the horror sphere, you may know him as the writer of One Missed Call, both the novel and the first movie's script. Outside of horror, you no doubt know him these days as the head of the many 48 groups, idols that have had a pretty tight stronghold on Japan for the last decade and a bit. Here's where I out myself a little. In early December of 2005, I had been living in Japan for just a few months when I saw a man in a suit on TV, surrounded by a bunch of girls in school uniforms. It was the announcement of an idol group by the name AKB48, and this group of idols was different to others. You would be able to go to their theatre directly in Akihabara and literally meet and greet them after shows. This was their niche, what would make them stand out from the many groups in Japan at the time. You could literally meet these idols and they were, for the most part, picked to look like the girl next door, approachable, relatable, and someone you could shake hands with and talk to. It was revolutionary at the time, although it would take another 5 or 6 years until the group really hit the mainstream, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, I didn't pay much attention to this news, and it wasn't until just over a year later that AKB came back into my life again with their 4th single, a single that was much different to their previous ones. It was darker, more intense, and far more controversial than previous bubbly outings. To cut a long story short, I like dark themes and so I took an interest in the group. They followed this single up with yet another dark song that looked at bullying and the horrifying effects it could have on people, and I was in. AKB were very much not well known at this point, but they were starting to gain traction. Fast forward to 2010, and dare I say the song that made AKB famous nationwide, Heavy Rotation. I was working in a junior high at the time, and watching the kids there suddenly start talking about this otherwise unknown group I'd been following for several years was bizarre to say the least, but that was eclipsed by just how famous they became after. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing their songs, seeing the members selling everything from appliances to cans of drink. They were all over TV shows and movies, and you really just couldn't blink without seeing or hearing AKB somewhere. It was strange for me to see such a small group I'd been following suddenly blow up into one of the best known groups in Japan at the time. Why the history lesson? Well, it's important to know who AKB are and how that affects the show we're looking at this week, Crow's Blood. After their initial run of dark songs, the ones that got me interested, sadly AKB returned to more innocent, bubbly, fun songs that hold zero interest for me personally, but apparently a whole lot more interest for the general public. Idols, of course, aren't allowed to date, and they are supposed to appear perfectly pure and innocent before the public. They could never do a thing wrong. That's how it's supposed to go anyway, but talking about the many scandals the AKB members have had would leave us sitting here all week, so we're not getting into that. But this is the image an idol is supposed to have. So, when Crow's Blood came out, a horror show written by their boss, Akimoto, and starring many of the most famous and popular idols from across the then many 48 groups, well, expectations were likely set. This wasn't even AKB's first horror outing with Akimoto. They had also appeared in the movie Densen Uta in 2007, also written by him, and in various other horror TV shows as well. So, when you have some of the most popular idols from across Japan who are known for their cute, bubbly concepts, what do you expect when you hear they're going to be in a horror show written by their boss? Well, probably not what we actually got with Crow's Blood. To say this is a brutal show would be the understatement of the century. I saw one review compare it to the idea of watching One Direction get gored to death in a snuff film, and that's probably pretty close. If you don't know who AKB are, if you don't know the image they have and the complete stranglehold they had over Japan in the 2010s, well, a lot of that shock factor will be lost on you. Imagine watching Britney Spears at the height of her career star in a film where she's tossed from a building and her landing on the ground below is filmed head-on, buckets of blood landing on people sitting nearby and broken limbs bent each and every way, all in full view of the camera. Imagine the Backstreet Boys sitting in a classroom when suddenly someone comes in and beats them to a bloody, pulpy death with baseball bats and steel pipes, and the camera never once flinches from the brutal action. That's pretty much the equivalent of AKB48 in Crow's Blood. It is relentless and violent, and if blood makes you squeamish, then this isn't the show for you. The contrast is, of course, intentional, particularly for Japanese audiences who, by that point, were well over half a decade into AKB's dominance over the market, and over a full decade since their debut. So seeing some of their most popular idols, girls with a terribly cute and supposedly innocent image, treated in such a way was horrifying. And that was the whole point. This is a horror show. It doesn't hold back, and you are supposed to feel awful as you watch it. Nobody wants to see their favorite pop idol gruesomely run over by a truck, and then run over again, and again, while the camera unflinchingly watches. Nobody wants to see the cute idol they've been following for years have their head repeatedly smashed into a bathroom floor, but that's what Crow's Blood delivers, and it delivers it in spades. Or perhaps buckets. Buckets and buckets of blood. We're nearly 10 minutes into this review and I haven't even touched upon the plot yet. I won't get too deep into it because this show is still very easy to find and watch now, thanks to it being a joint Western production. Hit up Google to find where it's available in your country, but I've seen it on Prime amongst many other places. In short, a transfer student by the name of Maki arrives at school and disaster seems to follow her around. She's just a little bit weird and bleeds black blood. People seem to keep dying around her, but then they come back and seem perfectly fine. Another student at the school, Kaoru, decides to look into who Maki is and discovers that she actually died in a hit and run a while back. So then, who on earth is this girl at their school, and why does chaos follow her every step? And what's the deal with her weird black blood? The production values on this show are high, no doubt thanks to the Western money pumped into the project. It's gorgeously shot, the cinematography is downright artistic at times, and overall it's just a really pretty show. It feels weird saying that after describing how absolutely brutal it is, but outside the buckets of blood and numerous broken limbs, it really is beautifully filmed. And that, I suppose, contrasts nicely, or maybe even enhances, just how gory this show is. This isn't a Japanese horror show with slow-building tension and ghosts lurking in the darkness. This is more akin to a Western slasher. There's a lot of violence, a lot of blood, and the camera never shies from showing it full on. Much to the horror of AKB fans who were probably expecting something a little more subdued, no doubt. This isn't a very long show either. It's only 6 episodes, totaling roughly 3 hours and 40 minutes, or about 2 movies worth of material. It still managed to drag a little for me in the middle, but in general there's not too much dallying around, and the plot is constantly moving forward. I think the idea behind the show was interesting, and it was certainly a new take on zombies, if you want to even look at it that way. It's not really, but kinda could be. Maki was dead, after all, and now she's not. And she's got weird black blood. So what's going on? Well, that's what you have to watch to find out. Acting. Not even once. That's how I opened this review, and I stand by that. AKB has produced many actresses over the years, so it's not like they lack talent in that department. I honestly don't even think the idols on display here were all that bad. And, to out myself again, many of them were amongst my favourites way back in the day. They did exactly what was expected of them. But apparently, what was expected of them was to turn the ham dial up to 11 and eat the shit out of the set each and every scene. Special shout out to Sakura, the star of the show and someone whose career trajectory just never fails to astound me, for taking her role and running with it like her life depended on it. There's no sandwich big enough to contain the ham she brings, nor any set strong enough to withstand the chewing she's about to give it. And this is genuinely for the best. If the role of Maki had been played any other way, it would have been an astounding failure. Maki is the pillar of the show, and the show itself would have collapsed around her if that role hadn't been nailed like a straw doll to a tree late at night. She's so unapologetic, and there's something almost cathartic about watching someone ham their way through every scene with such confidence and aplomb that it genuinely elevates every scene she's in. The show, particularly in the early episodes, is also quite funny. There's a dark humour that hides in many scenes, the kind that makes you wonder if you're a bad person for laughing at it. Some scenes you'll probably laugh at in pure shock, and others you'll wonder if that was supposed to be serious because of how much you're laughing at it. And for me, that elevates the show. Acting. Not even once. This isn't Shakespeare. This isn't the Oscars. This is a show starring idols, written by their boss who has a fondness for horror, and funded with copious amounts of Western money, with the idea that they want Western audiences to enjoy this too. So you get blood, violence, gore, and ham. A lot of ham. And without that ham, the whole show would have fallen apart. If you were to ask me whether I'd recommend this show to a non-AKB fan, then I would still say yes, with the caveat that you should at least be somewhat aware of who they are and what their image means to a project like this. Much of the nuance is lost if you're just watching this purely as a show with random actors, and not some of the most popular young idols Japan has ever seen. It's probably also handy to know just how violent and showy it is beforehand, because that's not for everyone. I'm not a fan of gore, honestly, but this show was just so over the top that it kind of circles right back around to hilarious rather than gross again. It's very much a dark comedy at times, with a healthy dose of mystery constantly lurking in the background. Anyway, if you've seen Crow's Blood, let me know what you thought of it in the comments below, and if you haven't, go and watch it and then come back and let me know what you thought as well. It certainly is a unique show. You have to at least give it that. But anyway, stay safe guys, and I'll see you again next time.